I am Faith Brautigam. I'm from the Kokomo-Howard County Public Library, and I'm here to talk to you about the Banksy effect. Have you ever had a moment where you met somebody new and you just struggled to remember their name? And you're thinking eventually, this person just does not look like an Emily to me. But in reality, you never asked your brain to create a box labeled what all people named Emily look like, right? Well, my brain had done that about great ideas, and I didn't really realize it. And I'm going to tell you a story about a project we did and how, looking back at that, I can see what I learned about what great ideas can really look like. So it started with an employee who watched a documentary, and she said, "Could we bring this big piece of street art and hang it up on the wall at the library and display it?" And for background, there's a street artist named Banksy. He's famous, and one of the pieces he did on the outside of a building was actually saved. And if you have all the right conditions, you can actually bring that piece and exhibit it where you are. And the piece itself is a painting, an oversized painting of a rat, and he's wearing kind of a Marxist-looking hat. So, as you might imagine, as the person who had to decide if we were going to do this or not, there were lots of considerations, right? Street art, Marxist hat, conservative town in Indiana. But that isn't what stands out in my memory when I think about making that decision. I remember going and sitting down in the office of someone who was part of the group that really wanted us to do this, and I said to her, like, okay, we're going to bring this giant piece of art and hang it on a wall. Like, that's it? That's the idea? And she looked at me and she answered in that really patient tone of voice that you use when the other person doesn't get it at all. And she said, "No, we'll do other things along with it. I mean, yes, people will come to see that piece of art, but we'll do other things that make it an experience when they come to the library." So notice what my brain was telling me. It was saying a big piece of street art is too simple. Like, this idea is too simple. And that's because that shadowy box in my brain that told me what a good idea was actually has an image that's more like something that would win a Rube Goldberg competition, right? A great idea is complex. And so it discouraged me from embracing this really simple idea. And yet, if you think about it, like, one Lego isn't really very much by itself. And so my staff did a lot of other simple ideas with it. And I'm really glad they didn't ask me if they were good ideas, because I might have said no, you know. But how many of you think your library could afford a couple of sheets of plywood? Right? Well, for our street art project, slap some white paper on them, and they became do-it-yourself graffiti walls. Do you know any local artists in your community? Okay, well, we had a local artist who had a style very compatible with Banksy's, and so we did an art exhibit of his work. So a simple idea can be a great idea if you have ideas that build on each other and make something that is bigger than those individual pieces were by themselves. We had an opening event for the Banksy, and we had special things happening that evening, but we also had a lot of the things that would be there throughout the exhibit. And there were two encounters from that evening that I will never forget. One of them involved a 20-something young man near the end of a very long line waiting to get up to the piece of art. And he left his place in line and he approached me and said, "Are you still giving away pins?" You'll see it on my scarf. "Because if you're out of pins, I am not standing in this line." And shortly before that, a woman who was probably pushing 80 had asked me about the commemorative shirt I was wearing. And she asked me what size, etc. And then she grabbed the back of my shirt and turned it inside out to see the size in case I was mistaken, because she wanted to be sure that she was purchasing the right size shirt. So At the same event, we had adults 50 years apart in age. One of them, a young male wanting to stand in line for a library giveaway. The other, a 70-something, wanting to write a check for something the Friends of the Library were selling, which is the kind of reason I love public libraries. But in my brain, I think great ideas often are ideas that are new and shiny. And you know what? Enamel pins are not new. Ski resorts have been selling these for decades. And shirts that advertise your event, I don't know who started that, but it wasn't us, right? It's not a shiny idea. But what if instead I had actually thought, what do we know about the people we're serving and this event? Or this thing that we have planned? How does that connect with the real people out there? And so I think a simple idea can be a great idea if you actually are connecting with people's identity or their emotions on a deeper level. Because, we went through 3 orders of those shirts that we had, and it's not because people liked rats, right? When we ended with 0 stock, it's because people were proud to be part of that, and they wanted to be able to remember that they had been part of it. And so our staff recognized that when they chose those ideas that weren't new or shiny. I mentioned the age span, but no matter what you were measuring at that opening event, we had diversity in lots of ways. And I'm pretty sure that box in my brain that knows what great ideas look like actually filters for ideas that work really well for me. So if the library served older white women who like to read, sew, craft, and play with their cats, that would be a great system, right? But that's not all we serve. And the things we did for this exhibit, they were not for me. I wasn't the person who loved street art or any of that. And so I'm really glad that the staff was able to look at that, because a simple idea can be a great idea if it goes outside that bubble of ideas for people who are like me. Shortly after that opening event, a young woman came and sat down in my office at the library, and she said to me, we often stop by the library on First Friday, but we see the library, and then we want to go see what's happening downtown. But when we were here for the Banksy event, there was so much happening, and we were having such a good time. We just wanted to spend the whole time at the library. I kept feeling as if I were at an event in Indianapolis, which is a big compliment if you're in Kokomo. And, I hear a lot of us really struggling to share things and tell things and write articles that convince people that libraries are still relevant. But you know what? I didn't have to tell her the library is relevant to her. And I didn't have to tell the Visitors Bureau, because when they'd submitted the story to wherever they submit it, the State Travel Magazine had picked that up. And I didn't have to remind the community we'd had a great year, because the local newspaper chose that story as one of the top 5 stories of the year. So your simple idea that you're working on with partners or thinking about, as you're planning it or when you start to do that, it might be a great idea if other people want to tell your story for you. So these people are looking at prints. We bought a book of Banksy prints and chopped it up. Gasp. We chopped up a book and we mounted the prints, and we had them on the wall near the actual big, so once they looked at the big picture, they could look at other Banksy prints. Again, so simple. And this guy was really excited and posted on our Facebook page. He drove from Michigan to Indiana to see this and was just super excited about his story about Banksy. And this photo was taken by the newspaper on the opening night, and we loved seeing this little girl get that picture in her cell phone. So, all right. Well, thank you very much. And if you want to look at my pin, you're welcome to come admire it up close.